Hi, and thank you for tuning in today. We're going to talk today about endpoints, the super spreaders in your network, and I'm going to give you 5 examples and 5 remedies of what to do about them. So I am Carolyn Crandall. I am the Chief Security Advocate and CMO of Attivo Networks. So it is a pleasure to be here with you today. I've been at Attivo for about 5.5 years, so seen a lot on network security and the advancement and sophistication of the threats and a lot of the disruption that's happened as we've moved to a remote workforce and migrated a lot of apps and data into the cloud. So it's a pleasure to be able to speak with you a bit more today. Now let's jump right in. So let's talk about those endpoints, those super spreaders within your networks. We all know that the attack surface is expanding at unprecedented rates, and with it, protecting all of the endpoints has really become quite the Herculean task. Forget, trying to find them all, no less secure them all. So the attackers have a huge advantage. They've got all kinds of crafty ways to be able to compromise the endpoint, and then it becomes increasingly complicated to be able to detect them once they've been able to break out. So now, from that initial compromise, they're going to start to use tactics that are not always caught or detected easily within typical endpoint type security. So they're going to look to find the credentials, privileges, and data that they need in order to advance their attacks. So Attivo specifically focuses on preventing these attackers from breaking out from the endpoint. So we work in tandem and in partnership with the EDR crew, where they prevent the initial compromise and we prevent the attackers from breaking out and moving undetected as they attempt to move laterally. So promised you 5 examples and 5 remediations. So let's first start with attackers compromising stored credentials. And so the problem is that, they're going to get to credentials. There's going to be some way that they're going to find either get people to make mistakes, have misconfigurations, leave exposed or orphaned credentials that are out there. And it leaves us with something that we need to be able to clean up. They're going to use those credentials to spread to other systems. So it's critical that we remove not only user credentials, but especially if you have any local admin, domain admin credentials that may be in the wrong places or easily exposed. We want to be able to get visibility into those things so that we can clean them up and remediate them quickly. So by removing these credentials and any way for them to escalate their privileges, it's going to make it a lot harder for them to be able to complete their attack. And so with Attivo, we're bringing forward a technology that is called EDN, our threat path functionality behind it. And this is the ability to reduce the attack paths. So what we'll do is we'll allow you to analyze the endpoints and identify any of these stored credentials or misconfigurations that the attackers are seeking to compromise. And it provides you with not a once in a point in time, but continuous monitoring of all of these credential risks and the critical attack paths that they create. So great way to be able to reduce your attack surface and be able to prevent the attacker from finding these and being able to use them to escalate the attack. It's also neat that we can do automated remediation. So if you do find these risks and exposures, you can automate the cleanup of them as well. All right, so part 2, we talked about how getting credentials is something we want to protect. So the first thing we're going to do is clean up the environment, have good hygiene, not leave them hanging out there for the attackers to steal. But we know that they're not going to stop at that. They're going to continue to look for additional credentials to steal and elevate their privileges or get access to the applications that they need. And a lot of attackers will talk about it. It's like, look, it's always easier to be able to get into an application or get access to something if you have real credentials. And so what Attivo brings forward is the ability to obfuscate the attack surface. So you're going to put a bunch of deceptive lures out there in the network. So it's going to become really difficult for the attacker to see employee credentials, admin credentials, and it can be applicable for cloud and SaaS credentials as well. And there's also some neat things that we can do to detect man-in-the-middle or credential theft as credentials are in transit. And then, of course, Active Directory. We're going to have a whole section on Active Directory because that is such a critical attack vector to protect. And so what we can do is we can put credentials and other artifacts out on the endpoints to serve as lures. So as the attacker looks, they're going to see these credentials intermingled amongst the production ones that are going to look real, authentic, all the way time-stamped, refreshed, so the attacker really cannot tell the difference. But once they try to engage, they are going to get breadcrumbed back into a decoy or an engagement server, where it's going to be able to collect additional information on them and be able to elevate and raise an alert automatically. There's some also automated isolation that can be done with these through our native integrations. All right, let's talk about number 3. So attackers are heavily targeting Active Directory. And it was interesting, I was on a call earlier today with a gentleman, well-known pen tester, and we're having a dialogue about, he as a, red team tester, what does he normally go to? And I asked, well, how often do you go after Active Directory? How often do the attackers go after Active Directory? And is it really a critical thing to protect, given that, there's not been a lot of new technology in this area that's come out for a while? And he said, absolutely, it's critical. Why not go to the crown jewels right away and see if you can get access to it? And also recognizing, because Active Directory has been around for a long time and really wasn't built with security as, a priority inside of it. It's got a lot of complexity in managing access and priorities and keeping, or preventing things from getting over provisioned and things like that. So as we look at this, the problem is the attackers are taking advantage of all of this. So they're able to, from any endpoint, query Active Directory. So what we want to do is find a way to disrupt that intelligence or that information gathering so that they can't get access to those Active Directory objects. The second thing that you can do is not only to hide the information they're after, but you have an opportunity to return fake information so that if they're using tools like Bloodhound or others, they're going to believe they actually are advancing their attack. But in fact, what's happening is they're just getting back fake data and information that will redirect them into a deceptive environment or an engagement server so that there's a notification of attackers trying to gather information from AD. So once you have this information, the defender also can use this information to fortify defenses and build a stronger overall threat program. So let's jump into this a bit here now too. So AD contains some of the most important data inside of the enterprise. And I'm sure a lot of you guys know this, that it's important data, it's sensitive, it keeps information, your privilege, your domain admin accounts, your system admins, shadow admins, all of this information is inside of there. And most people say, hey, look, if an attacker takes over a domain controller, it's kind of game over. They have all of the access to the information that they need to appear as a real user, to be able to reset credentials and to be able to move seamlessly throughout the network undetected. So it becomes really critical to take care of this high value asset. And most organizations, focus on securing AD admin roles, but user level permissions, are sufficient to gather this information. So, as I think about that, again, anybody can get access into the information. So you can try to set your policies and practices to control that, but at the same time, it'd be nice to have a different way of approaching it. What I'm going to go now through is a different way to disrupt the AD attack sequence. So let's assume that from the endpoint, I can get in, I can gain a foothold inside of that. I can do my reconnaissance and discovery activity. And most of the things that are out there today are not going to be able to detect any activity until the attacker attempts to move laterally to the domain admin PC. They're going to look then to steal the domain admin credentials. They're going to try to create their persistence, and they're going to try to get to their high target assets. And so what's neat with this new technology that Attivo has come forward with is the ability to disrupt the attacker very, very early in the sequence. And so as they conduct their reconnaissance and discovery, we're going to be able to detect that activity and raise an alert on it. And we'll be able to disrupt it so they won't be able to get that accurate information. And it's funny too, as I've talked to other folks and they're like, wait a minute, you're gonna mess with my Bloodhound tools. And attackers do believe that this information is accurate and reliable, and they will act upon it. And so again, it's a very early tip off that there's activity going on, information gathering that you wanna be aware of. And so let's talk about this as well here. So early and non-disruptive AD protection. You want to control what the attacker sees when they look for the accounts. You want to deny them that information, and you want to be able to collect TTPs on it. If you didn't notice from that prior diagram, it's really neat that this is all done from the endpoint, so it's very non-disruptive. So you're not actually touching production AD as you're doing this. And so again, any folks that are out there thinking, oh gosh, I don't want to touch anything in my AD environment, I don't want to create an additional pivot point for an attack. This does not touch production AD in any way and is all run from the endpoint, making it extremely non-disruptive. So let's get into a particular example of how this works. So Bob goes out and he queries AD from PowerShell. So AD Secure observes the query and reports it back into the council. So this is where we're going to be able to intercept that inquiry activity, and we're going to be able to look at it and say, okay, is Bob authorized to query AD? If he's not authorized to query AD, then we're going to validate that and then return back fake information instead. So again, a very efficient and non-disruptive way. You might say, okay, well, you know, whitelist the applications that you need to so there's no interference. But again, if Bob doesn't have the right identity and the right authorizations, he's not going to be able to get the information he's seeking. And again, you can further derail the activity by sending back fake information. All right, and then you can, of course, gather and track all of this information. So all of the different keystrokes and activities that the attacker is now doing, you're all logging that inside of the council and getting additional information about the, you know, the tools, the techniques, the methods, the procedures, et cetera, that the attacker is using. So let's now take a look at this. Now looking instead of through the lens of the defender, I'm looking at this through the lens of the attacker. And what you see is a with and a without Attivo. And it's a little bit nuanced to see on the screen here, but what we've done is Bancorp is the legitimate information. And what we've done is we've replaced it with fake information. So it looks very authentic and real. And the attacker is going to try to use this information because that's what they can see. The real stuff is hidden and the fake stuff becomes available, which then they'll try to enact on, but will again only raise an alert on their activity and lead them into an engagement server. So one of the questions you might ask is, well, why not just use the SIM or AD monitoring instead of trying out this new technology? And the important part of this is that, you know, event logs are reactive and they tell you what happened. Where if you use what I talked about earlier on with a threat path, which will tell you what might happen, so show you your misconfigurations, your attack paths. If you've got, you know, local admin credentials out on the endpoint, you've got shadow admins out there, you're going to be able to see what is at risk and be able to remediate that. The second is that the AD Secure solution is going to alert at the point where they're gathering data. And so again, you've got two tools that will work very well together to prevent the attacker from being able to successfully enumerate Active Directory. So let's talk about, does it really work? So AD Secure, this is an example of red team activity and how it was able to redirect. You can see, I probably can't see, it's really tiny on the screen here, but the red team is attempting to log into a decoy AD server. And then you can see how the AD Secure responds and injects deceptive credentials back to them. So again, it's really fun because we've been able to detect attackers on their first 20 commands. We've been able to catch them, you know, almost immediately as they start to do the attack. Because again, you know, yes, you can try to go and brute force your way into other things, or you can do other noisy activities, but why not just go to, you know, go to Active Directory and try to get the crown jewels? And so it's a very fast and efficient way to be able to detect the attacker. And again, I have to reiterate, our goal is not to necessarily trip up the red team, but it's to use it as a proxy that if we're able to detect the activities of red team, that we can successfully do that for actual attackers. And whether it's believable or not, in this particular example, we were able to keep the red team engaged for 48 hours, believing that they were actually into production AD. So again, that's the benefit of having a highly interactive environment for them to engage with. All right, so now we've talked about how we want to get rid of our exposed credentials. We want to obfuscate our attack surface. We want to protect our Active Directory environment. And now I want to go into dealing with attackers that are using network reconnaissance as their other way of breaking out and propagating from the endpoint. So here, problem is attackers are going to try to fingerprint the endpoints and find vulnerabilities to exploit. They're going to use those ways to move laterally throughout the network, and then they're also going to look for sensitive or critical data to attack. And so the things that Attivo brings forward is to be able to prevent the attacker from fingerprinting that endpoint. We're going to be able to detect the discovery and redirect that lateral movement into a decoy environment. And then in the process as well, we'll be able to capture the attacker IOCs and TTPs. So again, you can not only shut down that existing attack, but also be able to fortify the defenses in the future. So let's take a little bit of a closer look at what's going on here. So, you know, in this case, some people will joke around about it, making the attacker a bit of a puppet, because now you're controlling what they're able to do. So in this case, let's go ahead and build this out a bit. So we'll be able to take and tunnel inbound traffic, interrogating closed ports to a decoy for engagement. So when an attacker looks at it, they're going to look for ports and they're going to appear open. But again, it's not going to lead them to anything in production, but back into that decoy. The second thing that we'll be able to do is tunnel that outbound traffic, interrogating those ports to a decoy for engagement. And we'll be able to automate the isolation of that system as well, and then tunnel both inbound and outbound traffic to the decoy. So, it's a really effective way to be able to detect this activity. And a lot of the tools are simply not designed to be able to detect on activity at this level because it'll feel noisy using other tools. But in this case, because there is no activity on that closed port, when an attacker does go through and engage with it, you can then decide, right? Do you just want to raise an alert at this point? Do you want to redirect them into the decoy to study them? Do you want to allow them to operate to, again, pick up additional TTP information? So a very, very efficient way of preventing the attacker from fingerprinting that endpoint. And if they can't find those additional, ports and services to exploit it, again, it's going to stop their ability to run their recon through the network. All right. So let's take a look at it here. So ability to detect and derail ports and services probes, so we can control what the attacker sees and what they don't see. They'll be able to get quick awareness of discovery and lateral movement activities. They'll be able to redirect these connection attempts and improve the overall security posture. We can also really encourage people to use that native quarantine function to limit the attacking IP traffic to only the decoys. So again, a nice safe way to be able to study what the adversary is doing. The other side of things is getting into more of the traditional decoy capabilities, but we have a full bot sync deception fabric. And in this fabric, you can not only protect the on-premise environment, but you can also protect everything that's in the cloud, from things like containers, Dockers, Lambda functions, protecting databases, a whole variety of different things that you can do in the cloud, in addition to cloud and SaaS credentials. And on the network, it's interesting too, because you can make things look like your typical endpoints and servers, and you can run basically any golden image that you want, but we have a lot of things out of the box that are running real operating systems. You can also run emulated decoys if you prefer, but we always prefer real operating systems and applications because they appear more authentic. You can make things, again, look like the different endpoints and servers, Windows, Mac, Linux. You can even make things look like a drug infusion pump or an insulin pump. You can make it look like an energy substation device. I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can empower a organization to make their decoys look like. We can also cover things like network infrastructure as well as an Active Directory server. So again, a lot of flexibility to set up essentially landmines throughout the network so that as they're doing their reconnaissance and looking for their targets, they are highly likely to trip up upon one of these decoys, which will raise the alert and again, give you an opportunity to engage the attacker to look at their full attack replays and how they conducted their attacks. And you can also use the native integrations to automate isolation and blocking as well. All right, so now we've covered all of the different areas of credential theft. We've covered things around disrupting discovery and reconnaissance activity. And now is that fifth way that these attackers are looking to spread throughout your network off of that endpoint is as they look to steal, encrypt, or destroy local data. So let's jump a little bit into the problem here. So attackers are using different tactics to evade the endpoint security controls. They're going to steal and encrypt information as part of ransomware attacks. And I'm going to show you some particulars about ransomware attacks as we go through this as well. And we're also going to show how they use locally stored credentials to move laterally and escalate their privileges. So I really want to get into some of the ransomware stuff. So I am just mindful of time and going to keep moving forward on this. So one of the key steps in preventing an attacker from finding the data that they want and being able to encrypt or tamper with it is to hide it. So hide and deny the access so they can't see the network shares, they can't see the local files folders. You can even do this for cloud storage. You can do it for removable drives. And in addition to hiding those different types of pieces of data, you can also hide file-based VPN credentials and browser profiles, as well as the Active Directory objects that we talked about before. So, you know, a lot of the way we've done detection in the past is to wait for an actual exploit to happen and then be able to react to that exploit. This is particularly powerful because you can stop an attacker right at the beginning of their attack. Because again, if they cannot find the information they are seeking, they can't tamper with it. But the cool piece of this, much like Active Directory, you can hide the real things, but you can also stand up fake things. And so they may go into the system and look at the file structure and go, oh, here's some more data, but it's only the fake information that we've planted there that will again lead them back to an engagement server for additional alerting and observation. All right, so let's now play this out in the context of a ransomware attack. So if we look at how ransomware propagates, and this is just some of the different types with Robinhood, Maze, et cetera, that are out there today, and they all go through some fairly similar steps in gaining access, credential theft, lateral movement, persistence, and then to the payload. So it's really interesting as you look at the attack techniques and tactics that they're using, that they may come about them in different ways, but there's a lot of commonality in how they go forward. So what we're going to do is we're going to disrupt them all the way along the way throughout their different tactics. And giving you another visual on that is if you look at what they do during the initial access. And this is what our friends on the endpoint do is they're trying to prevent that initial compromise. But in the event that is not protected, then we're going to step in with a TiVo solution. So every place that you see the A next to it are the things that we can do to disrupt that kill chain and prevent that credential theft or harvesting, the escalation, et cetera. And we can prevent the lateral movement and the spread, as well as preventing them from being able to create and maintain persistence. And so very nice complement. So if you've got your EDR vendor that's talking about, hey, I've got you covered for ransomware, they do on the initial compromise, but when that attacker looks to break out from that endpoint, you're going to want to look at the technology I'm going to share in a minute here as a way to disrupt that attack and prevent you from falling victim to being one of their latest companies that they extort. So let's talk about step one. So restrict unauthorized data access. So we can take a look at the critical files and folders, the admin credentials and application credentials, shares, cloud shares, and be able to hide all of these. So if they cannot see them, they cannot steal them, they cannot encrypt them, and they cannot tamper with them either. So you're going to be able to do all of that, and you'll be able to capture all the unauthorized commands and the processes that spawn them. So again, some great threat intelligence that you'll be able to gather from this. So first thing, we're going to hide and deny access. But let's say that the attacker's coming in and they're doing reconnaissance. We can also set up different deceptive decoys out there. So again, we hid the real stuff. Now we're standing up some decoys for them to be able to find some decoy drives or map shares. And in this case, it's an SMB share example where the malware then encrypts the decoy share. So as soon as that starts to happen, the decoys are going to feed the attacker fake data, and it's going to throttle down the connection to slow the attacker down. So now you've got a few things that are going on. One is the attacker is engaged and consumed so that it is hopefully not being able to spread anywhere else. You've got an immediate alert. You can isolate that endpoint off of the system and prevent future spread. So again, a very effective and efficient way of being able to detect a ransomware exploit very quickly and early. Now, the other way to do it is to say, okay, before they have an opportunity to try to be able to spread a lot of malware out on the different systems, they're going to try to attack Active Directory. And as I talked about before, if we can disrupt that reconnaissance against AD and prevent that lateral movement and prevent those acts of propagation, it will again negate them from being able to conduct a large-scale attack. So again, here we're going to be able to set up the Active Directory to be able to detect the attempts at enumerating it. We'll be able to see that reconnaissance, disrupt that lateral movement, and again, we can steer them back into the engagement server to gather additional information. So collectively, these two things of hiding and denying access to both the files and to Active Directory can be a powerful deterrent against a ransomware attack. All right, so I've told you all the different 5 ways now that we can prevent an attacker from being able to be a super spreader throughout the network and to be able to elevate their attacks. So now let's talk about having a threat-informed defense. One of the unique things in the way that Attivo deploys this technology is that we gather a lot of information, but we all get a lot of information as defenders. So how does Attivo deliver this in a way that it becomes useful to the user? So if you look at what I'm showing you here, this is our Informer dashboard. And so you're able to very quickly to see all of the endpoint information for the attack source. It's in your upper left-hand corner. You'll be able to see a timeline view, so you can retrace all of that attack activity as well. And you can also see the event details. So as I mentioned before, as the attacker was trying to query Active Directory, you would see all of the different information here, or as they're trying to do a different form of attack, everything is going to be able to get logged within this system. And in the main part of the UI, you can also set up for automations to automatically isolate, block, threat hunt as well. So again, very powerful to reduce incident response. Most of our customers will cite, anywhere up to 10, 12x reduction in response time when they have to respond to an attack that came from an Attivo alert. Right. A lot of you have heard today about MITRE ATT&CK for detections, and it's really neat. So where I showed you that little timeline bar, you can basically choose to either do the timeline, you can do the attack phases, or you can look at it in the view of the MITRE ATT&CK cycle. So, and a lot of flexibility there to work within the structure that you'd like, or flip in between them. So again, it makes it very actionable and quick to be able to understand your attacks and be able to shut them down. Wish I had more time to go into the UI and interface, since there's a lot of cool things in there, but just top of the waves there for you on that. So just kind of wrapping this all up for us. So Attivo Networks at a glance, all of these products are made available through Attivo. The company focuses on credential protection and controlled access. So again, we want to prevent the attackers from being able to break out from the endpoint, and then deliver things that deny their access, detect their activity, and derail those attacks from being able to move forward. We have over 300 customers globally. We have 50% of the Fortune 10 who are using our technology, but what does surprise a lot of people is that 65% of our customer base is made up of companies that have under 5,000 employees. So what that tells you is you don't have to have a mature security program. You don't have to have a mature visibility program if you'd like some insight into those exposed credentials, but it becomes very easy to get started and then scale and expand as your needs change. As we know, world is changing, surfaces are changing between on-premises and cloud, and this is a solution that can very easily grow with you. We don't, as a company, report our revenue or size, but for those that are wondering about, how's the company doing, we just were number for 3 years running on the Deloitte Fast 500. We had 724% revenue growth during that period, and we've won a lot of awards for the things that that we do. So again, definitely a company that is able to support, fulfill your needs, and continue to deliver innovation to you. All right, bringing it all together, if you want to find out a little bit more about the product and the technology here, we have 3 different products in our portfolio today. So if you just think the Active Directory piece is pretty cool and can help you out, you can start with the AD Secure product. You can also move up to the Total Endpoint Detection Net. So that's our endpoint defense, which will basically cover all of those different attack vectors for coming off of the endpoint and preventing lateral movement. And then from an asset defense, you can also add the bot sync in, and that will give you the decoys for the detection, engagement, and threat intelligence. And if you want the full suite, you would buy into the whole threat defend portfolio and architecture. So again, we're giving you very comprehensive ability to basically disrupt if you look at the MITRE ATT&CK phases, the phases of discovery, lateral movement, privilege escalation, and collection. So very effective addition and resourceful addition to your overall portfolio. So I just build this out a little bit for you here. So kind of wrapping it all up together. So if you want contact tracing, so to speak, for your super spreaders within your networks, you'll want to look at Attivo. We can help you control the access to the attack surface by, again, removing those credential exposures and obfuscating the production assets and credentials. We'll reveal these attackers attempting discovery, credential theft, lateral movement, privilege escalation, and data collection. Again, this has been a bit of a weak point for a lot of folks if you're focused on just endpoint EDR solutions as well as DLP. This is a nice sweet spot in the middle of how we can really help you amp up your prevention and protection defenses. And again, we can restrict access to sensitive information, critical files to prevent those ransomware attacks from happening. And we can also give you a whole bunch of threat intelligence about things. So you can, again, learn from these attacks in a very company-centric way of how do you fortify what you're doing within your own environment. So I want to say thank you very much for tuning in today. Hopefully you found this useful. We'd love to be in touch and talk more. I also encourage you to reach out. You can sign up for a free trial of the AD Secure technology out on the ativonetworks.com marketplace. And I would definitely encourage you to take a look. You can be up and running in under an hour to give it a whirl. And I think you'll get visibility into some great information. So again, many thanks for tuning in and make it a great day. Take care and ciao for now.